Welcome Trinidad and Tobago to our News 4 report, a product of the Government Information Services Limited and the Ministry of Communications. I'm Nicola Barito. Let's take a look at the headlines. The Minister of Finance and the Economy set to deliver his maiden budget presentation on Monday, October 1st, 2012. The Integrity Commission appeals to members of the public to share their views and recommendations for improvement of the new document on the review of the Integrity in Public Life Act. And the Rise Maximum radio program, a gateway for hope and an opportunity for inmates to rise. Thank you for joining us. Minister of Finance and the Economy, Senator Larry Hawai, is set to deliver his maiden budget presentation on Monday, October 1st, 2012. Prime Minister the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissassa moved the motion for the date of the fiscal package to be read while speaking at the Parliament at Tower D of the Waterfront Complex in Port of Spain.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to advise that in consultation with the Honourable Minister of Finance, that Monday, 1st October, will be budget day in this House.
Minister Hawai has given his word that citizens need not fear the introduction of any new taxes in this upcoming budget. The Finance Minister says this budget will really be aimed at stimulating economic activity, so no significant taxes will be introduced. He warns, however, that citizens can expect some austere measures in the upcoming fiscal 2012-2013 package, which will ensure the nation is getting value for money. Mr. Hawai explains there are a few things which will take precedence in this budget, one major item being the stimulation of economic activity to facilitate a growth in revenue. He says two avenues which would be exploited to stimulate the economy are the energy and construction sectors, both of which he insists will get things moving again. Another matter at the top of the Finance Minister's list in the fiscal package is the settling of the long-standing CL financial issue. He expresses his intention to have it settled by the end of this year as it has placed a serious burden on the state's debt-to-GDP ratio. Minister Hawai is urging citizens, however, to not be somber about the budget as this country's financial position was pretty good, particularly in a regional context. He insists that while the remainder of the Caribbean faces serious austerity, Trinidad and Tobago isn't as hard-pressed. He highlights the high debt-to-GDP levels and relatively low foreign exchange reserves which other islands are experiencing, and adds that their main product, tourism, is probably going to face some problems. However, he says Trinidad and Tobago has a certain degree of fiscal space with relatively low debt-to-GDP levels, relatively low unemployment, and strong cash flows. Noting the billion-dollar budget deficit which this government inherited, Mr. Hawai says it would take another 3 to 5 years before Trinidad and Tobago could see a balanced budget, but assures he is committed to seeing it happen. Gregory McBurney, News 4.
Curbing the spread of the HIV/AIDS epidemic begins with education and testing. That's how the Ministry of State in the Office of the Prime Minister views how eradication of the disease starts here at home as they fulfill the mandate in providing a strategic response to the epidemic.
Did you know that 4 persons stand to contract the HIV/AIDS virus daily here in Trinidad and Tobago? It's startling statistics like this that has prompted a partnership among local stakeholders in health and the Ministry of State in the Office of the Prime Minister. This is one of the 8 community outreach programs being hosted by the Office of the Prime Minister with a special mandate for providing preventative information on the HIV/AIDS epidemic. As you can see, citizens have an opportunity to get free HIV/AIDS testing as well as testing for other chronic ailments. The focus is bringing the spread of the epidemic from 1 to many to 0. According to Dr. Beverly Andrews, Associate Professional at the Ministry, bringing about an effective change in the way citizens think about the disease is critical in decreasing the spread of the virus.
Getting to 0 means 0 new infections, 0 AIDS-related deaths, and 0 stigma and discrimination. So we work together with communities at the community level, with different partners, with the private sector, with churches, with NGOs, with other ministries, the HIV coordinators in other ministries, in order working towards the goal of getting to 0. So the impact we're hoping for this type of fair to have is that people will become aware that HIV is still a major problem in Trinidad and Tobago.
Supporting this change is head of the Voice of One Overcomers Club, Anderson Figaro, who highlights the need for more research and data on the effectiveness of campaigns such as this. He adds a more targeted approach can be developed towards changing behavior and lifestyle among citizens.
Programs need to be developed based on the understanding of human development, age group, what is expected of you at a developmental task, what is your psychosocial crisis. Once you have that understanding of human development, then you'll be able to design your program to suit, because HIV cannot be addressed in isolation to other social issues, right? HIV must be dealt with in a holistic manner, not by just words, but actually it must be holistic. If it's not holistic, we'll be just putting plasters on sores.
Local HIV/AIDS activist and patient Jonabelle Welch Davis spoke of her own experience living with the disease as a tough road ahead and finding strength in her faith. However, she adds that while awareness is needed, HIV patients like herself need to know that support is out there.
It's hard in a sense that it's not nice to be always feeling sick. You know, you always be one minute up, one minute down, you know, this kind of way. But otherwise, I guess I'm living a wonderful life. I'm living a courageous life. I'm a very happy person. I am always laughing. I'm joyous, you know. And above everything, I have Christ in my life, so I live in the top of the line.
It's fairs like these the Office of the Prime Minister hopes will make a difference in curbing the spread of the HIV/AIDS epidemic as it takes the message to communities across the nation. Kimberly Ramkalawan, News 4.
News 4 continues after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In its bid to function more effectively in uncovering corruption, maintaining oversight on persons in public life, and winning wider public support, the Integrity Commission of Trinidad and Tobago is appealing to members of the public, whether from chambers of commerce or professional organizations, to share their views and recommendations for improvement of the new document on the review of the Integrity in Public Life Act. Speaking at a press conference where the Commission revealed the proposal in detail, Integrity Commission Chairman Kenneth Gordon says he hopes that Parliament is concerned about the level of corruption in the country.
Integrity Commission's Chairman Kenneth Gordon says the current legislative framework for the effective operations of the Integrity Commission is inadequate and it prevents the Commission from meeting the expectations of its constitutional mandate as well as its own vision and mission. Providing an in-depth presentation of the new document to review the Integrity in Public Life Act was Commissioner Neil Rawlingson, who outlined a number of flaws in the current system, including the apparent absence of penalties for the breach of code of conduct by persons in public life.
There appears to be no penalty for the breach of the code of conduct by persons in public life, where with respect to members of Parliament, the Commission is required to report a breach to the DPP. It is not clear what action the DPP could take on such a report unless the conduct in question involved the commission of some other criminal offense. In other words, if we determine that somebody has breached the code of conduct, and there was no criminal, there was no larceny, there was no putting of money in people's pocket or in people's families' pocket, there's absolutely nothing, no guideline, both for ourselves and for the DPP, in terms of moving. What do we do? All right, you have breached the code of conduct, so what? Slap you on your wrist? We are basically saying that this has to change.
Mr. Rawlingson says the confidential reporting of corrupt practices in institutions by public officers should be facilitated. The investigative powers of the Commission, he says, should also be widened to include search and seizure as well as arrest. One major issue he outlined was the need to implement measures to protect what he called whistleblowers.
At the present time, the Act is too loose in terms of people giving evidence. And we are getting all kinds of variations on the theme about what can and cannot happen. So we think that the Act has to be tightened there. We want increased powers of search and seizure as well as arrest. We want to protect whistleblowers. It's not too long ago that we had the Enron case. The Enron case came about because of an internal whistleblower, and they unearthed some major private sector corruption as a result. We want to facilitate that.
Among the other recommendations made by the Integrity Commission are to fine-tune definitions so that the anti-corruption activities of the Commission are all-embracing, to create a specific portion of the Act to focus on examination of public bodies, to overhaul the financial disclosure provisions of the Act to facilitate faster processing of declarations as well as the efficient verification of these declarations. Include in this overhaul the power to levy fines and penalties on persons who do not file declarations, to establish a regime of practices for the processing of declarations from persons exercising public functions who are not captured under the IPLA to be managed by their respective commissions, to review the role of the tribunal in the processing of declarations and widen its applicability to investigations, to fine-tune the role of the blind trust, its implementation, management, and the oversight role of the Commission, to widen the investigative powers of the Commission to include search and seizure as well as arrest, to review and increase the schedule of persons in public life, to review and increase the list of persons exercising public functions to include all institutions that handle public money, to increase and improve contents of declaration forms to facilitate the submission of more relevant information to fight corruption and to reveal potential sources of conflicts of interest, to review all associated legislation so that there is a consistent focus on eliminating corruption, to create a regime of systematic arrangements to facilitate the exchange of information between all institutions involved in the fight against corruption and all institutions that routinely collect such data that would aid in such a fight. The Integrity Commission's chairman says persons are invited to call 623-8305, extension 227 or 236 or 221 or 294 to access copies of the review put forward by the Integrity Commission. He explained that meetings will be held to accommodate views and opinions, after which recommendations will be put together and sent to the Attorney General, who will then take it to Parliament. Verna Barath, News 4.
Sport is up right after the break. Stay with us. With a time of 21.82 seconds in the London 2012 Olympics, 50-meter freestyle, George Bovell III is one of the fastest swimmers in the world. The 2004 Olympic bronze medalist placed 7th in that event, and he shared with the media and his fellow Olympians how difficult a task it was to regain top form following a major accident. Wayne Cunningham has more.
On August 19, 2011, Olympic bronze medal winning swimmer George Bovell III was involved in a serious vehicular accident on his way to Miaro for a fishing expedition. Just under a year later, he was in the final of the 50-meter freestyle at the London 2012 Olympic Games. His path to recovery was not an easy one.
To begin with, I started this last season with a bruise on my brain. So if I even exercised to the point where my heart rate got slightly elevated, the blood pressure would have increased and I would have run the risk of having a stroke right then and there. So I spent 7 weeks laid up in bed, and it was an extremely stressful time for me because I didn't know if I would come out of it okay. And if anything, like if I sneezed too much, that could have been it. So, and then I had progressive CAT scans, and then my brain absorbed the bruise, and I healed. And on September 26th last year, I received a clean bill of health. So every year for the rest of my life, I'm going to celebrate this as my Alive Day. Just a celebration of life and gratitude for having it.
Bovell dropped 17 pounds during this period and had to work hard to regain muscle power, but through sheer determination, he was back in the pool.
So I really started this Olympic campaign from absolute scratch, and a lot of people don't know this. And for me, looking back at all my Olympics, I think this is one of the Olympics that I will be most satisfied with my efforts in. And I've been to 4 Olympics and garnered 1 bronze medal already. So all year long, it was an uphill battle. and I changed my training base to train with some of my rivals and a training group to help push me and provide camaraderie and energy. So I was training in Michigan, and I started to swim very well. In April this past year, I swam extremely fast, 21.8. And to give you an idea, I went 22.02 at the World Championships last summer. And we said to ourselves, our training is working, let's do more of it. So I think we went into a little bit of overtraining for a little while there. And I finally came out of that by June and July into the Olympics. I was feeling fast, I was feeling strong, I was feeling fit.
The recovery was so impressive that he was favored for a medal, but was thrown off his game in the final at London 2012.
And unfortunately, the 50 freestyle is actually the closest race in all of sports. I mean, it comes down to the details, and these races are won and lost by hundredths of a second. And I can't say I made any real mistakes. This was the first time I was ever held on the blocks because I do this race without a breath. So, and you can breathe in more air, greater volume of air into your chest if you stand upright. So it's a trade-off in this race of do you want to sacrifice your strength or your form? And normally I'm very, very good at holding my breath, so my my strength would not fade, so it's beneficial for me to go to keep the form. But in this race in particular, the crowd was so loud that they held us down. And I pretend to fix my goggles, and I control the flow of the start. So the starter will look at me, and I'm the last one to come down. And then right about now, take your marks, go. But we were held, and this announcer went back and said, ladies and gentlemen, introducing the finals. And when you're used to going off at this time, you know, your adrenaline starts to flood into your body, your heart races, and you're actually burning up your oxygen pretty quickly. So to be held for, you know, a little bit longer, 20-something seconds probably. Before my race, I think it caused me to burn out a little bit at the end because I did everything I could up until about 35 meters. But looking back to be in the final is the final. Just like Richard Thompson said, this is the pinnacle of sport. And once you're in the final, anything can happen.
As with most of our athletes, our Olympic presence will stay with Bovell for a long time.
And it's a great way to represent our country, you know, just to see that flag on TV. People say, hey, Trinidad, wow, where is that? Must be good.
Wayne Cunningham, News 4 Sports.
When we come back, the launch of the country's first ever prison radio station. Stay with us. The launch of the country's first ever prison radio station for prisoners implemented by the Ministry of Justice is being hailed a great achievement by the Chief Executive of the Prison Radio Association from the United Kingdom, Mr. Phil Maguire. He's encouraging all citizens to be a part of the program that will bring about a sense of hope and pride to all prisoners.
Phil Maguire, who is the Chief Executive of a radio station in the UK, has a major role to play in the birth of this Rise Maximum Radio here in Trinidad and Tobago. The local team championing this project met him 1 year ago during his visit to Trinidad. This is their story.
When we wrote to him and said we would like to open a prison radio station here in Trinidad, he said that's fantastic news. We are doing it here in England and we'll come down and share our experience with you, and he did.
It is at this junction that fuel was put to the fire of this project, and the dream of this broadcasting program, from behind the Golden Grove Maximum Walls security prisons, came to life.
That prison radio could become an integral part of rehabilitation of prisoners here in Trinidad. That it was a sound investment. And I was delighted that there and then, without prevarication, Minister Volney committed to develop the project. I must admit that I am utterly astounded that so much has happened in such a short time. Just more than a year later, I'm here for the launch of Rise Maximum Radio.
Mr. Maguire, who also works for BBC World, praised the government and the Ministry of Justice for this incredible initiative. He says a program such as this will not only seek to bring about new ways of reforming lives, but will also aid in the fight against crime.
It appears that their tireless work and dedication is truly paying dividends today. When I was last here, days before I arrived, the Prime Minister declared a state of emergency and imposed a curfew in response to the rising wave of crime gripping this beautiful country. And crime is clearly still a problem. It's a problem that requires complicated solutions. But prison radio can play a very important part in the battle against crime. Rehabilitation is crucial. Equipping prisoners with the tools, the confidence, the education, the self-awareness they need to change their lives is of paramount importance, and prison radio can help with that in a very meaningful way.
He says this program, presented by offenders themselves, will open up new channels for change and transformation.
It can force prisoners to confront the reality, the consequences of their actions, and the impact that their actions have had on others, on individuals and on society as a whole. It opens up opportunities for discussion and debate about the consequences of crime for the very people who most need to be involved in those discussions.
As the country reflects on its 50 years of independence, Mr. Maguire notes that this radio program is a remarkable achievement that will go down in history. He says everyone must do their part to ensure the radio station remains a success.
You need to continue to invest the time, the money, the energy, the resources to make this a real success. And the world is watching, not just Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Phil Maguire explains that part of his reason for returning to Trinidad and Tobago is to make a radio documentary for the BBC World Service about this auspicious event. He says the Rise Maximum radio broadcasts will be heard by millions of people around the world. Joseph Lopez, News 4.
That's how we wrap up this edition of our News 4 report, a product of the Government Information Services Limited and the Ministry of Communications. I'm Nicola Barito. Thank you so much for joining us.